Hi and welcome, I'm Andy Miocha and you are watching A News. Here are the headlines. More countries set to join the UK, Canada, Australia and Portugal and recognize a Palestinian state. Ransomware attack causes major disruption at European airports, says EU agency. Turkey ends additional tariffs on US imports imposed in 2018. Thank you for tuning in. France was set on Monday to recognize the state of Palestine, joining the UK, Australia, Canada and Portugal, who had done so on Sunday. Israel responded to the wave of recognitions, calling it a reward to terrorism. In the next few minutes, let's take a look at what Palestinian statehood might mean.
With support for a Palestinian state gathering pace, what would it mean for Palestinians and Israel? The Palestine Liberation Organization declared an independent Palestinian state in 1988, and most of the global south quickly recognized it. Today, about 150 of the 193 UN member states have done so. Meanwhile, Israel's main ally, the United States, has long said it supports the goal of a Palestinian state, but only after the Palestinians agree with Israel on a two-state solution. Until recent weeks, the major European powers shared this position. However, no such negotiations have been held since 2014, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has now stated there will never be a Palestinian state. A delegation representing the state of Palestine has observer status at the United Nations, but no voting rights. Regardless of how many countries recognize Palestinian independence, full UN membership would require approval by the Security Council, where Washington holds a veto. Without a full seat at the UN or control of its own borders, the Palestinian Authority has only limited ability to conduct bilateral relations. Israel restricts access for goods, investment, and educational or cultural exchanges. There are no Palestinian airports. The landlocked West Bank can be reached only through Israel or via the Israeli-controlled border with Jordan, and Israel controls all access to the Gaza Strip. The United States opposes the recognition moves by its European allies. It has imposed sanctions on Palestinian officials, including blocking Palestinian Authority figures from attending the UN General Assembly by denying or revoking visas. With British and French recognition, Palestine will soon enjoy the support of 4 of the UN Security Council's 5 permanent members, leaving the US in a minority of 1. While recognition of Palestinian statehood is largely symbolic and has little influence on Israeli actions in the territory, it highlights growing international support for Palestine.
The UK's recognition of a Palestinian state was formally marked in London as the Palestinian flag was hoisted outside the newly designated Embassy of Palestine. The ceremony took place in central London, where the Palestinian ambassador addressed the gathering in front of the building that had, until now, operated as the Palestinian mission to the UK.
This moment is not only about Palestine. It is also about Britain and the British government's solemn responsibility. It is about ending the denial of the Palestinian people's inalienable right to freedom and self-determination. And it is an acknowledgement of a historic injustice.
London's recognition of Palestinian statehood has triggered sharp reactions worldwide. The UK is now warning Israel against retaliation. Our correspondent Zainab Farajzadeh brings more from the UK.
United Kingdom's Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper says she has warned Israel not to retaliate after the United Kingdom's recognition of Palestinian statehood. Speaking to the BBC ahead of a UN conference in New York, she said Israel must not annex parts of the West Bank. The warning comes after Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer announced on Sunday that UK now recognizes a Palestinian state. Canada, Australia and Portugal made the same move. The Israeli Prime Minister condemned the move, calling it a huge reward to terrorism. He insists Palestinian statehood will not happen. The US is backing him. Washington described the recognition as a diplomatic gift to Hamas. Starmer mentioned that Hamas will have no role in the future governance of a Palestinian state. He stressed Hamas is already banned in the UK and announced further sanctions on its figures in the coming weeks. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas welcomes the move, saying it paves the way for peace and coexistence. Palestine is recognized by around 75% of UN member states, but it has no agreed borders, no capital, no army. That makes recognition largely symbolic, so still politically explosive. The two-state solution refers to the creation of a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, with East Jerusalem as its capital, broadly along the lines that existed prior to the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. UK ministers have highlighted the continued expansion of Israeli settlements in the West Bank, which are illegal under international law, as a key factor in the decision to recognize Palestinian statehood. This is Ina Ferazadeh for News, Manchester, United Kingdom.
The wave of recognitions of Palestine has caused mixed reactions on the ground, drawing praise from Palestinians and condemnation from Israel.
Britain's recognition of Palestinian statehood has drawn mixed reactions. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced the move, saying a two-state solution, with a Palestinian state existing alongside Israel, is a step toward peace. However, the move has been condemned by many, echoing Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's remarks that it would encourage terrorism, citing the Hamas attack in 2023.
I believe in a two-state solution, but I think that this recognition coming in the context of October 7th is an encouragement to terrorism and an acknowledgement that terrorism and what they call resistance works.
Britain's decision means Palestine will now have full diplomatic rights and missions as far as the UK is concerned. The UK government has begun referring to the West Bank and Gaza as Palestine and has updated its website accordingly. Palestinians have welcomed Britain's stance, calling it a victory.
It is time for these countries to stop supporting the occupation and to show their position after watching the demolition, the genocide, and the killing in Gaza City and all over the Strip.
Currently, the Palestinian Authority's delegation to the UK is not at embassy level. Britain's Foreign Office says it will outline the process for establishing full diplomatic relations with Palestine in due course. Embassy status would give the delegations protection and privileges under the Vienna Convention on Consular Relations and the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations.
In the meantime, Palestinians continued fleeing south along a central Gaza coastal road on Monday, carrying belongings as Israel's military pushed further into Gaza City. On Sunday, Israeli forces demolished residential buildings in the city, killing at least 31 people, according to Gaza's health officials. Israel said the operations target Hamas positions in what it calls the militant group's last stronghold, while Hamas claims far fewer residents have fled than the Israeli estimates of 450,000. Over in New York, everything is ready for the start of the general debate at the UN General Assembly. For what's on the agenda and what can be expected from all the meetings and the speeches this year, we go to the UN headquarters and our Ubay Shabander.
A number of high-stakes meetings are expected to take place here in the headquarters of the United Nations in New York this week, with world leaders from around the globe convening to address a number of multilateral issues, from world hunger to ongoing conflicts from the Middle East to Latin America. President Trump is expected to hold a number of meetings with leaders of foreign countries, including with President Erdogan of Turkey. The two leaders have improved relations between the United States and Turkey, and a number of business deals between the two countries are expected to be signed, including potentially major defense and aerospace deals. In addition, President Trump is expected to address the ongoing U.S. counterterrorism campaign against cartel foreign terror organizations in Latin America. We are also seeing reports that President Trump will meet with leaders from Arab and the Muslim world to present a plan to end the ongoing conflict in Gaza and to gain the buy-in of major countries in the Arab world that have stakes in ending that conflict that has raged now following the October 7th Hamas attacks against Israel. A number of issues are expected to be addressed by the 80th General Assembly here in the United Nations, which offers world leaders an important forum to engage one another and to hopefully find solutions to ongoing problems affecting people from every corner of this earth. I'm Ubi Shabander for A News TV, New York.
This year's UN General Assembly is also set to feature a speech by Syria's interim president Ahmed al-Sharaa. This is the first visit of a Syrian president to the United States in almost 60 years. On what can the visit and the speech at the UN bring for Syria as it starts to recuperate following nearly 14 years of civil war? We're talking with political analyst and former diplomat Melih Demirtas, coming to us from Ankara. Melih, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, with most of the U.S. sanctions on Syria terminated, a historic meeting between Trump and al-Sharaa back in May, do you see this trip, hailed by Syrian media as a landmark visit to the U.S., bringing more momentum into Damascus's efforts to rebuild the country?
Hello, Mr. Mirchan. Thank you for having me. Yes, as you said, these meetings, actually the serial of meetings in the United Nations General Assembly this year, it's maybe have an important meaning with all the topics inside the agenda. First of all, the topics because of this Middle Eastern maybe crisis, Middle Eastern atmosphere. First of all, the issue of Palestine. But I think in the second term, maybe this Syrian issue is an important issue because after the last meeting in 2024, we have seen that in these last 10 months, incredible developments happened in Syria. Please do not forget that, starting from December, also January and February, there are very fast terms, very fast years. All the regimes changed, and Mr. al-Sharaa and his interim government had the power now in Syria. And after that date, we have seen slowly the relations also between Syria and the other world countries. First of all, maybe United States, and also, of course, European Union countries. They had started to have important, maybe positive relations. Also, Turkey and Azerbaijan has, in this point, a very maybe constructive and diplomatic role to maybe integrate the new Syria to this new world order. And yes, Mr. Sharaa, with important members of his cabinet, I think like 30, 40 members of his cabinet now in New York, in United States, and they really have some hopes to make some dialogue and even maybe a meeting with Mr. Trump. And maybe they really hope to maybe combine these new terms with some peaceful and stable atmosphere for the new country, for Syria.
Well, this visit comes at a time when Syria has been engaging in security talks with U.S. ally Israel that are meant to lead to a peace agreement. Now looking back, following the ouster of Assad, Israel had conducted numerous airstrikes and took control of part of Syria. Not even a week ago, we've heard Syria's interim president saying the talks might lead to results in the coming days. Do you see Washington exerting pressure on both sides to settle the issue?
Actually, if you look at this issue from the side of maybe Syrian security, from all its borders, from starting from, of course, the southern side of the Syria, and of course, we must here underline the issue of Israel and the issue of the aggressiveness of Israel, as all maybe the Turkish maybe officials underlining. Also, Mr. Erdogan now in the United States, as you maybe also declare in your news section, he will also maybe underline this issue again with Mr. Trump's in his meeting with Mr. Trump. And now, against this aggressiveness, against all the security issue, and also inside the Syrian community, we have seen, as I said, in the last 10 months, many important crisis atmosphere inside the Syrian community. Think about these ethnics, think about these religious communities, which are also used, which are really very skillfully instrumentalized by, first of all, Israel. And with all this maybe unstable atmosphere, yes, maybe they have some pressure from the United States, Mr. Sharas government, but also they have some diplomatic and skillful maybe tactics to talk this. After maybe 40, 50 years of many tensions, authoritarian rule with Assad regime, and now Syria needs real diplomacy. Syria needs some real maybe support from its allies, and first of all, maybe United States, European allies, and of course, Turkey and also Azerbaijan.
Do you expect some other major global actors who have perhaps not engaged with Syria in that way do so at the General Assembly?
The actors, as you said, that the new atmosphere in this region is maybe different from like last year or maybe 2 years ago. First of all, we must think about Iran's position, also this Chinese maybe diplomacy. And the other actors, as you also mentioned, that maybe the Israeli actions are always changing. We have seen that Mr. Netanyahu's governments have always some unstable maybe tactics to talk with the other actors, except United States. They always have some changing attitudes towards the actors inside the region. Think about this last Qatari, for example, aggressive maybe attitude from the Israeli side. And now, of course, Syria will have this pressure on itself. From maybe Israeli direction, from Iranian maybe diplomatic sections. I think also from at least Russian and Chinese axis, it will have some pressure. So we really must have a real diplomatically skillful players now inside Syria. And I think Mr. Sharas already given some signals to United States media. I already seen some TV shows. He already makes some, I think, diplomatically skillful declarations nowadays. And we hope that he will also use this positive atmosphere for the new Syria.
Melih, thank you so much for joining us and providing us with your insight.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Turning to Eastern Europe, Ukrainian forces have struck Russian aircrafts in annexed Crimea. Ukraine's military intelligence says its special unit, known as the Ghosts, destroyed 2 Russian Beriev-12 amphibious planes. It's the first recorded loss of that type of aircraft in combat. The Soviet-designed plane is used for anti-submarine patrols and fitted with specialized detection systems. In the same raid, the unit also reported hitting a Russian helicopter. Tensions are rising over the Baltic Sea as the NATO alliance responds to Russian aircraft and drones operating near its borders. Russia's actions are testing NATO's resolve, and the alliance's response remains uncertain.
Tensions spiked over the Baltic Sea as NATO scrambled German and Swedish fighters to intercept a Russian Il-20M surveillance aircraft flying without a flight plan or radio contact. Days earlier, 3 Russian MiG-31 jets crossed nearly 9 kilometers into Estonian airspace before being forced out by Italian F-35s. Tallinn called it unprecedentedly brazen and triggered NATO's Article 4 consultations. That incursion came just after more than 20 Russian drones entered Polish airspace. NATO jets and defenses shot many of them down in what officials describe as the most serious spillover of the Ukraine conflict into NATO territory so far. In August, US and German officials also reported Russian-linked drones flying over supply routes in eastern Germany, gathering intelligence on how weapons move into Ukraine. Looking back, in 2015, Turkey shot down a Russian Su-24 after it briefly crossed its airspace from Syria. That pilot was killed, Russia retaliated, and Europe did not offer strong backing to Ankara, leaving Turkey largely isolated. Now, from Baltic skies to German supply lines, Russia is pushing at NATO's edges. The question is no longer whether these moves are accidents, but how far Moscow is willing to push and how far NATO is prepared to let it go.
Let's turn to this day in Europe, where Italy is winning praise for fiscal discipline while France faces market strain and a billionaire backlash. Our Anita Sharma reports.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where diverging economic trajectories are on full display this week as Italy wins praise for fiscal discipline while France faces economic heat and now a billionaire backlash. Global credit ratings agency Fitch gives Italy a rare credit rating upgrade from BBB to BBB+. Fitch cites improved budget performance and political stability under Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni. The government's deficit this year is 3.4% of GDP, which beat the country's own forecast and is still under the EU's 3.8% cap. Analysts say Italy avoided the kinds of domestic unrest and investor doubts plaguing other large economies, like France, where borrowing costs are climbing sharply. For the first time in decades, 10-year French bond yields matched Italy's at around 3.48%, suggesting investors now see the two countries as equally risky, something unthinkable just 1 year ago. France continues to struggle with market volatility, political uncertainty, and a growing revolt from its wealthiest citizens. France's Socialist Party is pushing forward a controversial new wealth tax proposal nicknamed the Zuckman tax after Paris School of Economics professor Gabriel Zuckman. The plan would impose a 2% annual levy on fortunes over 100 million euros, including unrealized capital gains, company shares, and foreign-held assets. Backers argue the measure could raise up to 15 billion euros annually, helping plug France's widening fiscal gaps. But the response from France's financial elite is quite fierce. Bernard Arnault, head of LVMH and one of the world's richest men, calls the proposal, quote, deadly for the French economy. He warns it would drive investment out of the country. He's joined by a coalition of business leaders and tech founders who say the tax punishes innovation, targets entrepreneurs, and would erode France's global competitiveness. Some analysts believe the tax, if implemented, could make countries like Switzerland, Belgium, and Luxembourg very attractive overnight. Now, France isn't alone in exploring ways to tax extreme wealth. Governments across Europe are under increasing pressure to address inequality, fix post-pandemic deficits, and fund climate and defense spending. Proposals to expand inheritance taxes, capital gains rules, and introduce exit taxes for the wealthy are gaining traction in Brussels, Berlin, and Madrid. But while public opinion is broadly supportive, especially amongst younger voters, the political risks remain elevated. Experts warn asset flight, legal challenges, and capital relocation could reduce revenue gains, especially if countries fail to coordinate across the EU. Italy's upgrade shows that fiscal discipline, even under a right-wing populist government, can bring rewards. France, by contrast, is in turbulent territory with economic strain, investor skepticism, and a politically explosive tax debate. How Paris navigates this moment could define not just its financial future, but its credibility in Europe's fragile post-pandemic recovery. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in the Netherlands.
Major European airports have faced serious disruptions in recent days as a consequence of what the EU has called a ransomware attack. Cyber attacks on check-in systems have affected thousands of passengers, with hundreds of flights delayed or cancelled.
The European Union's cybersecurity agency, ENISA, has reported that recent disruptions to airport check-in systems were caused by a ransomware attack. The agency highlighted that the incident underscores the growing risk such attacks pose to critical infrastructure and industry. The attack targeted automated check-in systems provided by Collins Aerospace, resulting in the cancellation of dozens of flights and affecting thousands of passengers since Friday. As of Monday, issues continued at Berlin, Brussels and London Heathrow airports. ENISA confirmed that law enforcement is investigating the matter. The ransomware, which locks data until a ransom is paid, was identified as the cause of the disruption. Experts note that while ransomware attacks often target high-profile victims, their frequency has not increased. Such disruptive attacks are becoming more visible in Europe, but they do not occur frequently, said Rafe Pilling from British cybersecurity firm Sophos. At Berlin Airport, systems remain offline, causing departures to be delayed by over an hour. In Brussels, passengers were checked in using iPads and laptops, with more than 60 flights cancelled. Dublin Airport reported only minimal impact. Collins Aerospace stated that it is working to fully restore systems that affected airports, including Brussels and Heathrow, with updates now in the final stages.
Monday marked the 45th anniversary of the beginning of the Iran-Iraq War, an 8-year conflict initiated by Saddam Hussein that claimed around 1 million lives. Even after the 1988 ceasefire, its impact lingered, leaving deep scars that continue to shape the region.
Today marks 45 years since the outbreak of the Iran-Iraq War, a devastating conflict that lasted from the 22nd of September 1980 until the 20th of August 1988. Launched by Iraq's then President Saddam Hussein, the war, known in Iran as an imposed war, claimed around 1 million lives on both sides. It began over territorial disputes, including control of the Shatt al-Arab waterway, and was also driven by Saddam Hussein's aim to weaken Iran following the 1979 Islamic Revolution. The 8-year conflict saw large-scale battles, missile strikes, chemical weapons attacks, and ended with a ceasefire and no major territorial gains. While Iraq no longer commemorates the war following Saddam Hussein's fall in 2003, Iran continues to ensure the conflict remains vivid in public memory. Every year, Iran holds parades and memorials, while museums, books, and exhibitions keep the memory of the war alive for younger generations. Historical moments are also remembered. In August 1990, Iran gave prisoners of war from Iraq a hero's welcome, with many emotional reunions. Similarly, the bodies of soldiers who fell on both sides were exchanged, highlighting the human cost of the conflict and ongoing efforts at reconciliation. The Iran-Iraq War left deep scars on both nations, with immense human and economic costs, and remains a defining chapter in Middle Eastern history.
Baku has experienced its speediest weekend as the host of the biggest motorsport event, the Formula One Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Our Narchicek Jahangirli reported directly from the Baku city circuit and experienced the electric atmosphere on the ground. She now shares with us some exclusive backstage moments.
If you think Formula One is only about speed and being the fastest, think again. This pinnacle of motorsport is about pushing the limits of science, strategy and mental strength. In F1, drivers and machines become one. The engine's pulse beats with the driver's heart. Drivers must constantly read the track and feel how the car responds beneath them. Free practice sessions are the stage where tires are tested, conditions are studied, and every corner of the track is learned.
Strategy is one of the most important parts of F1 race. Right tire at the right time can make a difference between winning and losing.
Before race day, up to 24 engineers rehearse dozens of pit stop procedures, a perfectly synchronized routine of changing tires in seconds. Behind every driver, there is a vast team of mechanics, engineers, and strategists making victory possible. Formula One is as much about technology as it is about talent. Each season, teams work tirelessly to design faster, more powerful cars. With qualifying on the horizon, everything must be in place.
On the second day of Formula One, the qualifying session is always unpredictable. However, its outcome sets the tone for the race day. The fastest driver to survive all rounds starts the race at the very front of the grid in pole position.
For fans, the roar of engines is music to the ears. Across 3 Grand Prix days, supporters travel thousands of kilometers to back their favorite teams and drivers, to feel the adrenaline and to live the unique atmosphere of Formula One.
The action isn't just on the track. The fan zone here in Baku is buzzing with excitement. From racing simulators to live music and merch, fans are soaking up every moment of the F1 weekend.
I think we've got two great drivers, so they should do really well.
I think Verstappen is still the favorite, even though Piastri is leading in the points. I still think that Verstappen is always going to be the favorite.
I really want that Lando will be the winner, but I think like Oscar has more chance, of course.
I support the whole team, that is why it is hard to choose, but I confess love Norris a bit more.
I just want my team on the podium, and I hope George Russell will finish ahead of other drivers.
The atmosphere is intensifying as drivers make their final preparations for race day. You can feel the energy rising as everyone's locked in and ready to go racing. Between interviews and interactions with fans, drivers must find a way to remain fully focused on the final race. Nowhere is this more important than on the streets of Baku, a circuit where the smallest mistake is punished instantly. Victory doesn't belong only to the fastest, but to the most strategic driver, the one who can balance speed with wisdom and intensity with control. A brilliant performance by Verstappen, a key moment in the title race, and a podium shake-up to remember. And that's a wrap from the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. The checkered flag waves on Baku. See you next season.
A new war of words is unfolding over Afghanistan's Bagram Air Base, once the hub of American operations in the country. Our Afghanistan correspondent Tamim Bahis has more on this from Kabul.
U.S. President Donald Trump told reporters that the United States is pressuring Afghanistan to hand back control of Bagram, insisting that it should happen immediately. He warned that if Kabul refuses, Washington would take decisive action. President Trump later doubled down online, posting a warning that unless Afghanistan returns the base to the U.S., there could be severe consequences. Afghanistan's authorities quickly issued a formal response. Their statement emphasized that the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity are non-negotiable, reminding Washington of commitments made in the Doha Agreement to avoid interference in Afghan internal affairs. The statement said it favors positive relations built on mutual interests, but argued that the U.S. to pursue a realistic approach rather than repeating past mistakes. The Defense Ministry's Chief of Staff went further, rejecting any possibility of a deal over the base, stating a deal over even an inch of Afghanistan's soil is not possible. For many Afghans, Bagram symbolizes both years of foreign military presence and their struggle for independence. The latest standoff underscores how the airbase remains a deeply sensitive issue between Kabul and Washington. For now, Afghanistan's position is firm. Bagram is not on the table. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
Iran's top diplomat is in New York for the UN General Assembly to finalize preparations for Iranian president's speech and meetings. The session of the UN body comes ahead of the likely return of sanctions on Tehran or its nuclear program. Artura Shiralilu has the details in the Iranian capital.
The Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi arrived in New York to participate in the plenary meetings of the UN General Assembly, meet counterparts on the sidelines of the annual event, and also oversee preparations for the speech and meetings of President Masoud Pezeshkian, who is scheduled to fly to the UN headquarters on Tuesday. This year's UN event is significant for Iran compared to previous years in that the Iranian chief executive and his top diplomat, in addition to taking part in the regular proceedings as well as meetings with their counterparts, are expected to discuss the latest developments in Tehran's nuclear program. The General Assembly is taking place days ahead of the 28 September deadline for likely return of Iran's nuclear sanctions called for by the European powers, France, Germany and the UK, which have referred their dispute with Tehran to the UN Security Council. The European powers are signatories of the Iran nuclear deal signed in Vienna and on 28 of August demanded a snapback of the pre-2015 nuclear resolutions against Iran if they fail to reach an agreement with Tehran by the 30-day deadline. Prior to Araghchi's departure to New York, unconfirmed news reports suggested that he was due to meet European officials in Vienna. However, the official sources denied these reports. Also last week, Iran's foreign minister rejected the news in Western media that he had held direct talks with US nuclear negotiator Steve Witkoff, saying that only mediated contacts are going on between Tehran and Washington. It is not announced whether Araghchi and Witkoff are due to hold indirect negotiations again, this time in New York, as they did in Oman and Italy earlier this year, which were disrupted following the Israel-US attacks on Iran's civilian nuclear sites in July. The US is demanding zero enrichment in Iran's nuclear program, but Tehran stresses that the enrichment for peaceful purposes is its right under the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting for A News TV, Tehran.
Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev has arrived in the United States on a working visit to take part in the UN General Assembly. He is among the heads of state and officials from across the globe attending the high-level gathering. On Monday, President Aliyev, accompanied by First Lady Mehriban Aliyeva, landed at New York's John F. Kennedy Airport, where they were received by welcoming officials. Turkey has ended additional tariffs on U.S. imports imposed in 2018. The Turkish Ministry of Commerce released a statement emphasizing Ankara is committed to protecting its interests and staying firm in its policies. The decision, which was published in the official government gazette, lifts duties on 33 categories of goods, including alcoholic beverages, cars, tobacco products, and cosmetics. The move coincided with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's visit to the United States. For the first time, Azerbaijan has brought together global investors, government officials, and business leaders under one roof. The inaugural Azerbaijan International Investment Forum opened in Baku on Monday, setting out the country's vision to diversify beyond oil and position itself as a hub at the crossroads of East and West.
The first Azerbaijan International Investment Forum opened in Baku, bringing together global investors, officials and business leaders. In his message to the event, President Ilham Aliyev underlined the country's recent economic gains, with the non-oil sector now making up more than two-thirds of the economy, exports nearly doubling in 6 years, and debt cut to just 6.5% of GDP. With industrial parks, modern seaports, and expanding transit along the Middle and Zangezur corridors, Azerbaijan says it offers investors both stability and global access.
Any growth is not possible without investments. Investments can be public, that is financed from the state budget, and they should be private as well. So our goal now is to bring more private investments. For this to happen, during the previous years, the government of Azerbaijan, under the leadership of President Ilham Aliyev, implemented large-scale reforms. It created necessary infrastructure.
The message resonated with delegates from across the globe. From Mexico to Brazil, officials said the forum opens new channels of cooperation.
Well, it's important to know what is Azerbaijan doing in terms of promoting investments. We from the embassy try to promote complementary things. We also have our own promotion for investments, and that's what I'm here.
It's fascinating because it's the first time it's done. I see a lot of very important people coming around. So this is opening a new chapter in our relation. You start with agriculture, and that's technology going back and forth. You got fertilizers, technology, you have, and that's only in agriculture, but we've opened up some other areas as well. And I think that the next few years will be very interesting.
Beyond trade, technology and innovation were high on the agenda. Delegates discuss how artificial intelligence and digital tools could help Azerbaijan gain a competitive edge.
So this Baku forum was actually a place to talk about these opportunities and how they can get a more competitive advantage, specifically by leveraging technology and AI. I would say the strategic location and also a great relationship with the neighbors that will bring an ecosystem and give them a competitive advantage.
The forum also showcased concrete deals. Akva Power of Saudi Arabia signed an agreement to build a major desalination plant in Azerbaijan, a project worth hundreds of millions of dollars that reflects the government's push to diversify beyond oil and gas.
For us particularly, it's very important because today we signed the agreement to develop, build and operate a very large desalination plant in the country. So it's not that you're signing to build a plant, but as we heard in the message from the President Aliyev, is to bring capital, technology and ideas for the next 25 years.
On its opening day, the first Azerbaijan International Investment Forum brought together government leaders, investors and business representatives to discuss new opportunities in trade, technology and sustainable growth. The debates and panel sessions continue tomorrow with further focus on public-private partnerships, healthcare, green energy and inclusive entrepreneurship.
Joining us from Lahore to talk on the first ever Azerbaijan International Investment Forum is energy and economy expert Osama Rizvi. Welcome, thank you so much for being with us. Now, how significant would you say the gathering we see in Baku is, and how much of an opportunity does it bring not only for Azerbaijan but the region of South Caucasus as well?
Well, thank you so much for having me today. I believe this is not only the first instance this year or the last year that Azerbaijan, Baku, has lent itself to the world, has opened itself to the world as an investment destination. You see, it has also served as a neutral ground for many mediations in the recent geopolitical conflicts. It is working closely with other countries like Turkey, like other neighboring countries, to become an energy hub, a transit hub. And I think this investment forum falls or connects neatly to this overarching theme wherein Azerbaijan, or Central Asia as a whole, and I've said this before as well, lots of time, that it stands to play a very important role, not only in the traditional capital sense, but also renewables, AI, and overall energy security of the world.
Well, now that you've mentioned the renewables, do you see this event and events like it in the future attracting more investment in green energy, perhaps, as the country evolves its approach?
Well, yes. I mean, if you look at the current projections, Azerbaijan intends to add around 2 gigawatts of renewable energy by 2027, 2028. From the current share at 26, it intends to raise the share of renewables to 32%. It also has a lot of potential, around 10 gigawatts, according to some estimates. The Karabakh corridor, the Nakhchivan corridor, and other corridors, they have a lot of wind and solar potential. But at the same time, we need to realize that oil and gas sector will also not go anywhere. So it will not be replaced. These further investments will be added. So, I mean, the current country still exports a lot of oil and gas. More than 50-60% of the revenue comes from oil and gas. and it has further plans to invest in this domain as well. So it's like the idea of energy basket that they are embodying as a country, which is actually really good.
Osama, thank you so much for joining us and providing us with your insight. In other news, Russia is weighing reforms to its migration system, including abolishing work patents and restricting the entry of migrants' families. With millions of foreign workers already in the country, these changes could have major consequences for both the labor market and social services. For more on that, we go to our Sevil Rajapova.
Russia is moving to reform its migration policy by scrapping work patents and tightening rules on family entry. The patent system introduced in 2010 to regulate foreign labor and generate revenue has become central to migration management. In 2024, it brought in about $1.36 billion. From May to January 2025 alone, revenues reached $693 million, 35% higher than the same period last year. Around 3 million foreign workers are currently employed under this system. At the opening of the State Duma's autumn session, President Vladimir Putin announced plans to eliminate patents. Parliamentary leader of LDPR, Leonid Slutsky, also called for migrant workers to come without families, citing strains on education, healthcare and social services. The Labour Ministry also proposed lowering quotas for foreign workers in sectors like construction and food services and banning them entirely in alcohol and tobacco retail. The aim is to reduce reliance on migrants and shift jobs to local workers. Uzbekistan remains the largest source of labor migrants in Russia, accounting for 23.3%, followed by Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. Analysts warn that eliminating patents and reducing quotas could hit both migrant communities and regional budgets hard. It is Sevil Rajapova reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A News.
Well, that's all we have for you for now. Thank you so much for watching and stay tuned to A News.